welcome to USQ Leadership Conversations, where we take tough leadership issues to the round table. So tonight we are looking at discuss or dictate how we interact with others from opposing viewpoints. I'm Rian Roux, I'll be your host tonight, and I'm joined at the table by 5 fantastic guests who I am delighted to introduce to you. We have Air Commander Martin Smith, retired from the Royal Australian Air Force in 2020 after 33 years. As the Director of the General Air Force Logistics, he was responsible for the strategic direction of all engineering, infrastructure, supply chain, and support systems. His leadership experience includes command of 3,200 Air Force aviators who enabled airbase capabilities, force protection, and expeditionary operations. He has commanded a multinational force in Afghanistan. He was awarded the Commendation for Distinguished Service for Outstanding Leadership in Warlike Operations. He has operated across the globe, working in over 30 countries, and represented the Air Force in 2 exchange postings with the United States Air Force. This included an appointment at the Pentagon, where he was responsible for the development of future logistic concepts. Welcome.
Thanks, Rian.
Nice to have you here, Marty.
It's great to be here.
Awesome. We've got Isaac Moody as well. He is the Managing Director of Prethink Group, which incorporates some of Toowoomba's leading hospitality brands, including the Baker's Duck and the historic Gabonbar Homestead, both of which are fabulous. The Prethink Group has holdings in property management and investment across Australia. In addition to his business interests, Isaac has extensive board and management experience in the charity sector. He currently serves as the Australian Board Chair for Compassion International, a large global charity caring for over 2 million of the world's poorest children. Isaac has previously served in governance roles for private hospitals, the Toowoomba Chamber of Commerce, and numerous other non-for-profit organisations. Welcome, Isaac.
Great to be here.
Great to have you. All right, we have Rebecca Teo. She is a senior lecturer in journalism at USQ. And Rebecca has previously worked as a journalist for Here, There and Everywhere, formerly APN News and Media, and then which was then one of Australia's largest news publishers. Rebecca's research interests include conflict journalism and trauma and professional communications. Welcome, Rebecca.
Thanks.
All right, this is Jason Myatt. He is a voice actor, sound recordist, editor, ADR, and post-production specialist, a radio broadcaster, creative and consultant, and is the manager for digital learning, audio and video here at USQ. We're actually in Jason's studio. Jason has worked for clients around the globe for radio, TV, mindfulness and e-learning material, training, promotional and corporate videos and documentaries. Welcome, Jason.
Thank you.
It's great to have you here.
Thank you.
This is Hamida Nazari. She is in her 4th year of study here at USQ, studying a combined degree in law and arts and majoring in international relations. She's the Law Review Editorial Officer for the USQ Law Society and is also the Vice President of the USQ International Relations Student Association. Hamida is part of the Hazaras people group of Afghanistan and was raised in Pakistan. Welcome, Hamida.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
Great. All right. Well, our goal is to have a really great conversation just with each other. It's going to be free-flowing. We're going to go through a range of different topics. But the idea is to work through leadership in what can be a pretty tough environment. Scholars who talk about sort of this cultural moment often refer to the idea of VUCA, volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. We live in an age of dramatic and rapid change across all sectors of societies, and our societies are increasingly interconnected. Something can happen on Twitter in one moment, and share prices can drop somewhere else in the same moment. War can break out, economies can plummet. People move across boundaries and borders, conflicts spill over. We live in an interconnected time of multiculturalism, internationalism, and these effects are felt differently in various contexts, but they are undoubtedly interconnected and complex. And so that's the space that students will graduate into. That's the space where you'll be leading in medical fields with radical increases in technological advancements. AI is coming to the market rapidly, changing journalism, changing medicine. We've got students who are graduating into business, and business is rapidly changing. We've got students who are going to be teachers. You've got to educate the citizens of the future. Good luck. This is the space you've got to lead in. And tonight's conversation is particularly going to focus on when we manage those interpersonal skills, the space of relationships, the space of conflicting views, the space of values clashes. Scholars call this time they say we have a prevalence of a discourse of conflict, where even social media algorithms will drive conflict up. It's the currency of our time. We love the clickbait. We love the outrage. And so we are in a time of increasing conflict, a polarization of culture. And there is a great diversity of views out there. And we have to manage that. We have to find a way to build bridges. That comes down to our capacity to work with other people. That comes down to our capacity to understand, to relate, and to lead strongly when needed. And so we're going to explore some of those areas tonight as well. And let's just dive in. Let's get started.
Sounds good.
Man, I spoke about a VUCA. Now that's actually a military concept, came out of military education as a way of describing this era and the complexities that you face in the military. What has been some of your experiences with our cultural moment and the challenges and the opportunities that we face there?
Yeah, it is an interesting area. Military operations can be tough. You can have the best laid plans sitting on a shelf, take them off, put them into execution, and who knows, the enemy gets a vote very quickly and your plan goes out the window. So VUCA was originally sort of conceived within military academics, and because we needed a way to rethink through how to proceed in all that ambiguity and complexity. What we found was leadership. You can have all the technology, all the training, but leadership is the glue that holds together the team when all that ambiguity is prevalent. And within that leadership space, if I had to look to define one overriding characteristic that makes the difference, beyond the standard management, beyond the standard risk analysis, beyond assumption management, it's positivity. When I've been in situations where the tasks and the risks and the enemy who gets a vote might seem insurmountable, the positivity that a leader must display, needs to step up to and present to their people, is what I call the force multiplier. Imagine the parallel universe where you walk into the office and your boss is in the fetal position thinking, make the pain go away, make the pain go away.
Yeah.
That's not going to cut it, and it doesn't. We train people to deal through hardships and uncertainty and step up in front of teams, put your chest out and say, you know what, I haven't got the answers. We've got some tough issues in front of us, but I know I've got a great team. I know we've got a mission to focus on, so let's just rip the Band-Aid off and get this going. I think really important to that, it's not optimism, because optimism, I talk about force multipliers. Optimism in military operation can be a casualty multiplier. So you've got to be really careful about being optimistic in my business. But what you can do is take stock of the goodness, the assets that you've got at your hand. Focus on the negatives, and all of a sudden it's a downward spiral into a very dark place. You look at the assets that you've got to play with and maneuver across the chessboard of your business or your military operation, and suddenly it creates the vision of opportunities, whereas previously it just seemed like a very dark place.
Yeah, wow. I've recently I was at a forum where political leaders were talking about the dangers of cynicism around the complexity in which they look at political leaders, and they say if we are cynical of political leadership, then it's this same sort of eroding, cancerous element of our society where you can't find hope, you can't find trust, because you're constantly undercutting it through cynicism. But being able to believe something's possible and thinking positively about the future.
Totally.
You think it relates?
I certainly do. I guess when I started in my leadership journey, I thought, it's the big office in the corner. You get the car park space, you get the the EA and such. I was thinking leadership as the me, not leadership as the effect. I thought, well, people will just do what I tell them to do because that's their job. But quickly, I very quickly turned that around to understand people need leadership. You could look across the democratic challenges that we're experiencing at the moment that, without, I'll stay in my safe lane here of not being critical of the political process, but I will note that people need leadership. They want good leadership, but they'll take good enough leadership in that space. But what they often will see is the leadership void. And people will fill a void with all sorts of craziness. If leaders aren't getting out there in front of their teams and looking for ways to look for that positivity, encourage and establish a vision for the people to chase after.
That's about connection though, really, isn't it? That's about building and establishing connection. So if you haven't got connection, it's hard to... You're talking about a void, and that void happens when you don't have connection with people. And the cynicism also happens when you... Well, I think that when you don't have connection with people. So I think a fairly essential part of leadership is establishing connection. And you were talking about basically demonstration and example and creating connection so that there is a purpose for people to want to follow and for people to want to sort of buy into an idea. So it's not enough just to have an outcome and a sort of an indicator of what you want. You can successfully reach it if you have all that connection and you have all those other things packed in.
Definitely.
I'm fascinated, Martin. Over 3,000 people you were leading. How did you build connection with 3,000 people?
I'd like to say one at a time, but you imagine the time management challenges there. So those people were globally dispersed.
Okay, another challenge.
On basis. And you'd like to think that technology will fill the void. It doesn't. Anyone who's aspiring to be leadership has to be prepared to get what I call tactile relationships with people. Get close, understand them, let them look you in the eye, and bare your soul, bare your chest, and explain what you need of them. But it's also just as important because it's never about you. It's the people out in the field that are actually doing the deeds, doing the job. And so you also need to know what's holding them back. So I'd spend a lot of time on the road in that job. Probably every second week I'd be off to a different location, trying to understand them, trying to press the flesh, not in the political sense, but in an understanding, how can I help you to get your job done?
In my early 20s, I ended up running a music festival and at about the age of 22 I had 3,000 people that I was leading, accidentally, and the problem with them is most of them are volunteers, so you can't sack them. So you got to get on with them. You can't move somebody else. You're just grateful for whatever comes your way. But I just think I'd learnt, I was terrified at the time at a young age, but just how important leadership is. Everything rises and falls on it.
Yeah.
And just the power of encouragement of people. I think you've got to be careful not to manipulate in that too. But even in the midst of considerable conflict or uncertainty or highly stressful times that can happen in putting a music festival on in bad weather and certain things, is the power of encouragement is a great antidote to conflict in a big team when you have to get little micro seconds with people. But
if you look at it, I hear you say the word manipulation, and I'm sure a HR guru would come up with a better word for the same effect. Because it's all about, if this is the start point, the leader's job is to get the mission done. Using the resources, using the vision, using whatever tools in the bag. I guess still within a left and right of arc. Some of the great leaders of our times have operated very successfully, even though we mightn't appreciate some of the things that they've accomplished in an autocratic sense.
Sure.
Bring the masses of people along for an outcome. That's leadership 101.
Sure.
I talk about bounds, however, be it a moral bounds, be it a legislative law of armed conflict sort of bounds. You've got to stay within that lane. But manipulation, might be another way to term it.
Sure.
But for me, if you're getting to the end point and staying within those lanes, what does it take to get this job done? I'll keep all the tools in the bag.
That sort of opens up the question about what is effective leadership, and everything is much more clear with the benefit of hindsight. And so you're talking about some of the great leaders of our time. Sometimes they are, you're talking about in terms of outcomes and what they managed to achieve. From a historical perspective, not all of those leaders have been great people as such. They've, there's a lot of stuff packed into that. So
most certainly, and don't ever confuse leadership with morals, or even a position. A leader's the person who's going to prosecute their agenda, and it could be the corporal, or it could be the 4-star general. But don't ever confuse the fact that it's leading you to a good place. Leadership is just that, a means to an end to achieve the objective. The objective might be evil, but you're still using leadership traits to get you there.
Oh dear.
It's a contentious observation.
That hurts.
I know, but it's absolutely true. Some of the most inspiring leaders haven't been necessarily for the forces of good, but they do a pretty incredible job motivating or leading their country within what they consider their moral or ethical bounds. And trust me when I make the prescient observation, it's a different lens through which they look at it from which we look at it.
Yeah, sure.
Which is where we derive our moral sort of compass from.
But then I sort of think, what's the legacy of that leadership? Which is a very different question. That's where the judgment call on hindsight comes in.
Yep,
and
totally.
Bringing as many people with you for a particular purpose that improves people's lives, for example, that's a legacy.
Yep.
So I'm not sure that you could sort of evaluate some of our leaders, our great historical leaders, through that sort of lens. If you
no, you're totally right. Putting a moral lens over the individual objectives and the outcomes is very much a focus that in our culture is just normalised. But cultural perspectives differ, but leadership in its truest sense, that is not as neatly bounded.
Yeah.
What do you think?
I think I'm going to agree with Martin that leadership is the process to take you to the end. It doesn't necessarily take you to the good end. And then definition of good and goodness differ from person to person. That leadership from a historical context might not be the best leader for us, but to them and to the people and the purpose they served, they were the best one at the time. So what we can take out of this is know your bounds, apply these leadership rules, and then make sure you go to the good place, at least from your own perspective and the people you serve.
Okay. What's the good place, Isaac?
Well,
Yeah,
involves great
question.
food.
Yeah, a wedding feast, I'm sure.
The baker's done.
Is this the product placement spot here?
I just really enjoy the food there.
Look, I'm fascinated on this definition of leadership you had, and which I resonate with. But is it essentially who's following? Is that the definition of leadership? No.
No, it isn't at all. Leadership is the art and science of motivating a group of people to achieve the objectives that you want within a parameter of behavioural sets that you establish as appropriate. So there's no goodness or badness in that definition. It's all about your capacity to motivate and influence, manipulate, encourage, berate, drive to get to that outcome. And it's a pretty stripped down definition. But at the end of the day, there's plenty of other.
But is that a distinctly military perspective when the lens you see leadership through is very vertical, not horizontal?
I could accept the premise, but I would pass back at President Trump as a counterpoint. So no, I wouldn't say.
I wouldn't call him a horizontal leader.
No, there are, I think, equally similar examples in politics, in industry, in cultures, as there are in military, that will prove the point that leadership isn't about goodness. Leadership doesn't need to have a moral compass over the top of it.
No, sure.
That's the role of, if you like, laws, legislation, democracy. They channel through what that culture sees as goodness. But without those, is that an open playing field for mischievousness of leaderships to be very sexy to carry their message? And I'd say history would bear out that it is.
Do you wonder whether or not you can frame, if you were to frame leadership as a little bit more broadly to something like influence over other people, rather than the science of cause and effect, but more broadly as influence, could you then encapsulate moral frames of reference like an ethical leader or a servant leader or an authentic leader, or some of these moral frameworks for leadership, to sort of say, actually, if you look at somebody like Martin Luther King or Gandhi or Jesus, or people who we sort of think have like a moral character to them in some form, whether you like those morals or not, like they influence people by their character and their persona and their sort of, that was sort of their realm of influence. It was the way that they got people to buy in was actually by their example. Do you feel like there's space for that influence in thinking?
I absolutely do. I talk about the lens through which you look at the context of the environment that you're working within, and the objectives that you want to achieve within that environment. And I think it's a very righteous Western philosophy approach to seeing leadership as taking the will of the people to a good place. Fantastic. And by and large, that largely is our approach to it. But when you've worked across 30 countries, when I've sat in a warlord's hut in Afghanistan, who's controlled 800 people very effectively in that province, not a nice guy. Moral compass is 180 degrees from where I am. But you just have to admire, for what it is, his role and his capacity to drive those people to generate the outcomes he needs. That's leadership. So I'm trying to keep the purity of the definition of leadership at the forefront before we then overlay the lenses through which we like to see the happy ending.
Sure. No, that makes total sense. So in that leadership space, the dynamics, so the way that you enact your leadership, that involves maybe a position, somebody has a role, and somebody has another role. But they're also a somebody and a somebody. They're a person. There's a relational dynamic as well as a positional dynamic. How do you manage the relational positional dynamics, and where are the areas for that to go really well, and where are some areas that you feel like we could get into trouble?
I think any of us have managed people or led people. Conflict happens the minute there's one person, apart from yourself in the room or the mix or the situation. And I think I've been very influenced by Patrick Lencioni's book, 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, which is an easy read for a non-academic like me, and to apply to a workplace. But one of the key dysfunctions of a dysfunctional team is that they avoid conflict. And I think that's a basis that I like to see with whichever organisation I'm leading or board I'm chairing, or in my own staff, is that there's right from the beginning, there's a premise that we don't avoid conflict. And it's any sort of manoeuvre to try and avoid conflict will end up in great dysfunction. And I've seen it time and time again. And of course, when you have to do your first, say, in business, your first dismissal and put somebody off, that's like the worst situation. I mean, that's a high conflict situation when you're first one of those. But you you get better in time of handling those situations, but it's much easier if your employees have come on with the premise that we're going to deal with conflict, we're going to be really open about it. I think there's a value that we bring in, which is a bit of a funny old word that nobody really knows what it means, but in my business group, we have vision, mission, values, and one of the values is meekness, which means like project strength under control. And it's a bit of a military thing, but as old Roman war horses were meeked, and that means they could go into battle and not get flighty. And my daughter rides horses, and we have horses at home and our little hobby farm. And horses, you know, you can shake a plastic bag near them, and they'll freak out and tear off, and it's very dangerous. So let alone going to battle in thousands of years ago, where there's a clanging of swords and banging and screams of anguish and all the horrors of war. And so a meeked horse was one that could have that project strength under control. And I love that as a value in our world, that we try and bring in that, hey, conflict, that happens. It's like the banging of war and the screams of anguish that happen and the clanging of metal, but meeked is purposeful in that, and that we navigate the conflict. We expect it. We almost, maybe not embrace it, that's too strong a word, but are very open to it. And I think that's a really key thing that I've learnt the hard way, actually, but I've been very inspired by others who have managed to do it and hope to get better.
That's awesome.
I think emotions really do come into leadership and every scenario, and thinking about conflict and thinking about some of the things you're saying there, Isaac. I've looked back in my own team here and other teams that I've worked in, and I guess I'm very new to leadership. I'll say that from the perspective of I seem to have been a manager for some time or a coordinator of a team for some time, but I wasn't really leading them. I was bucking that. I didn't want to be the one standing up the front. That was just a personal thing. And what I've, I guess, learned over the last few years is about emotions and about conflict. I don't want conflict in my team. Yeah. And that caused issue, as you've discussed, Isaac. And I think it's, for me as a leader of a group of creatives. So you talked about the people that you were leading back in the day of the festivals, and thinking about the people that you lead. There's very different personality types here. And I think that was the thing that I always struggled with, was that emotional type that I was trying to lead. And once I sort of stopped and went, okay, I'm avoiding conflict and this is causing this. Let's just take a step and just see what this conversation actually needs and grow up a little bit from my perspective and have that discussion. Don't be afraid of the conflict. Let it come out, and then we can work with that. And I guess, I was always scared working with creatives. They're too touchy, or, everybody has a different emotional type. And I have worked out with my team that, okay, I work with that person that way, that person that way, that person that way. It's hard when there's 3,000, but, from my perspective in a small team, it's helping me get an understanding of how that leadership needs to listen, as you've talked about, and, that interesting people like creatives working at, and Rebecca, I'm sure that you've dealt with plenty of journalists that have a lot of, that emotion. And, when you're working as a journalist, you're trying to let go of that as well and report.
Newsrooms are very robust places, as you can imagine. But I'm always sort of fascinated by the idea of people who try to avoid conflict. You don't seek it out, but we're all people, right? So we all have different viewpoints, and that is a form of conflict at its core. Is that if I might disagree with you, for example, about your definition of leadership, but I think the whole way to navigate that is through respectful consideration. You don't have to agree, and I think we're increasingly getting into a society where we feel that if someone doesn't agree, it becomes a problem because it puts a different value on it rather than it just being a different perspective. So the idea that we should avoid conflict, I think, is unrealistic because we're people and we all have different viewpoints. And some of them have greater, obviously, they can cause greater catastrophe than others in terms of expressing your viewpoint. But if you're navigating that through respect and consideration and knowing as a leader, and this is important, where to stop the conversation and where to just make a decision, I think that's part and parcel of effective leadership. But avoiding conflict to me seems extremely unrealistic because, if you have another person in the room, you've got potentially a different perspective.
Yes. When people come together, conflict is inevitable. It happens. There's an old saying from where I come from that said, when cups and plates come together, they make a sound.
Yeah.
And that's how people are. When we come together, conflict becomes inevitable. From my own experience as the president of USQ's International Relations Society, it was that element of consideration played a very big part. Because when I joined USQ, we didn't have one. We had to start it from scratch. I was one of the founding members, but currently I am the only founding member that's still on the board. So I do a lot of recruitment for executives and all. The important thing there to consider is that it's a volunteer position. It's students who study full-time, work full-time. One is a parent, looks after 2 kids. It's very important to consider their time and their volunteer work. So when making decisions, conflict happens. There are times that don't work for them. There are ideas that don't work. What I, as a leading member there, want to bring to the table is I want to make them feel a sense of psychological safety where they feel like they can ask whatever, or they can comment whatever, they can suggest whatever. Because especially in a power imbalance perspective, what happens is that a leader of an organization can say, well, I'm listening to you, I'm open to feedback and everything, but if the employees or their colleagues feel a sense of a fear of rejection or retribution, they don't give the suggestions. It's good to give them that feeling of safety, that no matter what you say, it's okay.
And that also comes back to that idea of connection, being a very important part of leadership, I think, as well. Establishing that connection, maintaining it. So
the power imbalance that you speak of, it's a really important phenomenon to understand in my business. The warrior culture is what we're about. And we're a very hierarchical approach to organisation. So here's your job, here's your rank. Look up and salute. What we were finding in the 80s and the 90s, we drove multiple very large aircraft with a lot of crew members into mountains, into oceans, because of that dominant hierarchical approach to doing our business. Because people were scared of telling the commanding officer who might be driving the aircraft at the time, what you're doing is a really dumb thing and you're probably going to kill us. They've told them once and said, sit down, shut up. So we had to completely reimagine how we do that what we call now crew resource management. And so basically, everybody needs to be encouraged and develop that culture to speak up before you do dumb stuff. It's too late to do it in the post-mortem sense when you've got a 15-foot sort of smoking hole in the ground. So having that, setting the culture is absolutely critical. When I chair a couple of organisations, and the first thing I'd say to new directors coming into here is one of your primary jobs is to make sure I don't do dumb stuff. I'll say something, and if it doesn't ring right with you, pull me up right there, because I need you to keep me in check. I sometimes might do dumb stuff.
I think that permission giving that you give then is really important, right from the outset, isn't it? That you give people permission for that, because I think inevitably you find yourself with power imbalances. I own my businesses. I can't totally deconstruct that power imbalance, but I can give permission for my authority to be questioned, and we'll all be better for it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Perfect.
But I think that's that aspect too of leadership that is about acknowledging your own vulnerability. And being okay with people pointing it out. Obviously, you're not going to be okay with people pointing it out if you think you don't have a vulnerability. And that's, good leaders use their teams well. They don't do everything themselves because That's the whole reason that we have teams, right? They use procedures and policies and codes of conduct and codes of ethics as maps and how to navigate difficult spaces. But if they think they have all the answers, then that's not an effective leader.
It's a really good point. We used to recruit, particularly for the officer corps or air crew, the captains of the team, the smartest guys or girls in the room, bring them through. Now we actually look beyond that to emotional intelligence. If the leader is confident and just say, sharp, we're going this way, sort of people, that's where you drive aircraft into the ground. Having emotional intelligence that, you're smart enough in your own skin to recognise you don't have all the answers, that you need to work all the assets that are available to you to produce the best outcome that you can actually drive. And sometimes you have to recognise, I'm not the smartest guy on this topic, so let's bring him in, or girl, bring him in and get the team effect happening. But emotional intelligence in a leader, that's, for me, it's one of the key things I look for when I'm looking to promote people into the next rank.
It's sort of leadership from the inside out in that regard, because it's coming from a place of security, of knowing that I can take someone disagreeing with me, telling me I'm stupid for doing this. I'm okay with that. Which sort of leads me to the point of the other things we're okay with, our values, the things that the lines we draw for the way that we want to interact with people. It might be effective to do it one way, but I'm not going to do it that way. I'm going to take the long route because I want to deal with people in a certain way because of my values or something like that. How do we balance organisational imperatives with our moral sensibilities in leadership?
Oh, that's a hard question. But I think it comes down to evaluating as a leader what's the most sustainable option, because there's no point getting a hard and fast outcome if you've got carnage and you've done irreparable damage in a team. You need to look at what's the most sustainable way to create impact and get results, to my mind.
I think sometimes when you have a larger group of people that you're leading, I think you have to have a tolerance for a little bit of carnage too.
Oh, for sure.
On the pendulum, because it's so hard to get that balance. And
yeah.
I know there was one CEO of an organisation that I was chairing that had an incredible time of growth and 400% growth in this organisation, and it was great, but it come at the cost of people and culture. And then I was fortunate enough to be on that organisation long enough to see another CEO who then brought a lot of stability, but maybe not as much growth. and so I think the pendulum, it's hard to let it swing. And so I've just experienced that sometimes you've just got to have a broader view for carnage, like that's a broad term, and then sometimes you have to have a view of stability, and it'll come back, and it can't get too out of control. But it's very hard to get it lined right up, those two.
Well, see, I would make a distinction between carnage and disruption.
Sure, of course. Yeah.
So disruption, to me, carnage is something that is you can't really come back from. Disruption is, part of change, and you were talking earlier, Rian, in the introduction about how society changes and everything, the pace of everything changes, but every generation thinks that they're at the coalface of change. To every generation before us, this is a period of massive change. I'm sure in the Industrial Revolution they were talking about that as well.
Absolutely.
So, all of the technologies change, and certainly there are new challenges. But facing challenge and facing conflict and leading effectively through it are not anything new. So, it's part of the human story from throughout time. So
context is really important.
Yeah.
It's the first thing I start with. For me, it's the map that gets you to where your destination will end up. In looking at the context of leadership, and when you talk about organisational requirements and values, morals, I look at the context and I look at a problem as the mission criticality of this particular little bounded problem. How important is that to get it right and get it right tomorrow? And if it's not, then I say, okay, let's potentially use this as a training opportunity and give people permission to sometimes get it wrong. The greatest lessons I've ever had in my life is when I've dorked something up really badly, and then you go back and reflect on it, and you can't get that out of a textbook. You get that out from lived experience.
Totally.
So being brave enough to give people permission to fail as a leader is a really important learning outcome to grow those people to be the me's in 20 years' time. Hopefully not make as many mistakes as I made along the pathway, because mentoring is the other part of that, being that coach to say, well, I hear what you're saying there, but maybe just sort of 3 degrees course adjustment and you won't run into that wall. Context, it's so important.
Absolutely. So, you go.
I want to bring back to your ethics, and for me, ethics falls into journalism a lot. And
Oh, here we go. I'm already starting to feel it. Oh,
yeah, no, I guess
do your worst. Come on.
I've got some thoughts in my mind and around leading for me in a new thing that I'm hoping to move towards, and it's around the ethics of a business, and when for me a media business that I'm looking at and thinking about journalists, and then the conversations around ethics start flicking around in my mind of the comments around journalists or organisations being given funding for government funding and an expectation of following an ethical line or a moral line. That's at a much larger scale, at a government scale. Let's bring it down to the workers who are working in my business. The leadership, obviously, that I portrays my ethics, my etc. When it's a broadcast or a media organisation, and we as human beings, individuals within that business have an ethical belief or a thought pattern. How hard is it for journalists, I guess, to fall into away from their personal beliefs to the company belief or the company moral line? Is that really, is there a fine line around a human being's personal ethics? I know I'm floating around here a bit.
Well,
you get where I'm beating around the bush.
Yeah. I think that it sounds to me like you're asking. I'm not going to speak for all of my my colleagues and my former colleagues, but it sounds like you're asking: do journalists ever have to go against their own personal codes of ethics in order to get a story? Well, that's an individual choice, right? So I have never been in a position. I've always been able to talk to an editor about whether I wanted to do a story or not. We have a code of ethics that's very clear, like many other professions. We're a self-regulated industry because obviously in a democratic country, it's potentially problematic to have government regulation of something like the news media. But I have never personally been in that position. I won't speak for any of my colleagues, but
I guess, from that I'm picking out a couple of lines that we've been taking here around conflict, that it is okay to have that conflict, what you said before, and in this conversation where it is okay to disagree with your editor or to have that robust conversation.
Yep.
And I guess, bringing that right back around to, conflict in the workplace, away from ethics for a moment, but, thinking about conflict, from a creative perspective, as a designer or as a producer, it's great to have another opinion, another feedback, and often creatively conflict can happen, but wonderful things can come out of that conflict.
I mean, we have a very defined code of ethics, and that's our North Star.
Yeah.
So that guides everything that we do. And as journalists. And I mean, the interesting thing about media is that, we've had these discussions before, Jason. Media is a big pie, right? So it contains a lot of different aspects, and there's public relations, there's advertising, there's marketing, there's other, types of content provision. And news is a very specific thing within that, becoming less so as things sort of, blend together. But the idea of what sets journalism apart, I think, apart from things like news value, of which conflict is one, is that code of ethics. We aren't really much without our code of ethics. And that's the same for any profession, though.
That's right.
Yeah,
Profession.
and I guess I'm relating that back in my mind to working my day-to-day team and my ethics with them. How does that code of ethics of the organisation, the organisation's policies and procedures and their ethical standards of behaviour that we do that training every year. So I guess there's that. Then there's the ethics within my own team, the smaller group. It's interesting.
I think the thing about media, as you were saying, and leadership in media is that it's very visible, whereas a lot of organisations, they don't have that level of visibility.
Yes.
And so, it's hard to, you can point to examples where, things have possibly not been sitting well with you. But I mean, that's the nature of being in the public eye, right?
And sometimes it would be ethical to actually avoid the conflict. So let's say in a scenario where, from a lawyer's perspective, where your client tells you that they are faking evidence, what do you do there? Generally, by law, you have two choices. You can either convince your client not to fake evidence, because that's a crime in itself, or you can let your client know that by that point, because you'll have a conflict of interest, you cannot act for them anymore. In this scenario, it's not something you can kind of solve, but even by avoiding that, you are avoiding a big conflict, but you're solving it at the same time.
I am interested
And yes,
in...
it's regulated a lot.
Yeah, and I'm interested in sort of where your conversation was going there, because when you look across industries as leaders, it is a very visible, media is a very visible sort of player in that space, but whether they lead or whether they follow, that's a different conversation, because it's an audience-driven industry, right?
Yeah, and I guess that's my struggle at the moment. I'm looking at moving into a role where am I the one who's setting the guidelines for the business, or is the directors? I need to follow their philosophies and beliefs. It's because it is such a visible media that we're in. It's something that obviously I'm thinking about at this level, just around ethics.
That's good. Well, let's move into intentionality of engaging in these spaces of conflict. So when is it productive? When is it counterproductive to open up a can of worms? When do you want to welcome people into a robust conversation and get the whiteboard out and speak honestly? And when do you just want to say, now's not the time? Who wants to go? You go?
Well, this won't be the conclusive answer, it's just one facet of it. I've found that what you don't measure, you don't care for. And so I always try and make sure whatever priorities I have, they're measurable. And so if I have a priority to not avoid conflict in the workplace, I need to measure it somehow. And that seems like a crazy thing to do. How do you measure that? But I think there's just so many practical tools available to people, and some of this isn't the latest ideas at all. But I certainly find in when it comes to leading people or managing people or working a team, I always make sure that performance reviews are put in. And it's a great temptation, I think, especially for people who may be considering getting into a professional career or leading an organisation, starting from small. You think we don't need that. I think it's really important right from the beginning to do things like regularly scheduled performance reviews, because they are wonderful ways to measure and not avoid conflict. Yeah. I think another one which is incredibly, and it goes to what type of leader you want to be, but 360-degree views, and the leader, I don't know if you do it in the military or not, but where your next rung down can do a 360-degree evaluation of your own leadership. You probably do it. And to lead in that first, and so inevitably you're sort of inviting conflict. And so I like to see these points. Just in a practical way, I also measure it, that if I'm not inviting conflict every month in some way, and it's, I'm not going for 5, but just the difficult conversations, raising them every month with an employer, and if they don't have that way to express it, now I'm not personally doing that with all my staff, but that they have a meaningful way of conflict being raised once a month, then it will affect their tenure in the job. You get much longer serving employees because they're more happy to be there when you're raising this regularly.
Yeah.
You realise very quickly whether you're on the same vision and mission and sort of purpose and alignment, whatever that might be, whether it's a business alignment or in a not-for-profit, it might be a cause. But you also get really great feedback on your own leadership style too, and all the managers down. So that's just one practical thing we've learned is every month have a performance review or a scheduled check-in or a 360-degree view. You only want to do them once a year or something. They're pretty intense, but there's a lot of different measures out there, and I think they're all worth embracing.
Really good.
It's interesting because whenever I heard about performance reviews, I thought it only applied to employees.
Okay.
And
No,
it
both
applies.
ways.
Yeah, it should
Yeah.
apply to the leader as well.
Totally.
It absolutely shouldn't. And in the military, we have a military sort of code of
Yeah, you'll have a very
justice.
structured way.
And one of the charges you can levy against somebody is insubordination.
Yep.
And so the idea that you're actually inviting your subordinates
Yes.
to say yes or no.
So you do
it's
360
confronting.
degree-
We absolutely do.
Really?
Again, we worked out if we're not adjusting our leadership styles to remain contemporary, then the super smart people that are joining the Defence Force these days, who are so much smarter than me, who are digital natives, they're very charismatic individuals that you put them in a room and give them a problem, they'll solve it really quickly. And they'll take this the wrong way or the right way, led by digital dinosaurs. And so we had to sort of, find the best way and giving them a vote as to, what they thought about their leaderships. That's a journey that we needed to go on. I've dismissed middle-level managers or commanders who it's like to use the discuss or dictate. They were dictators. They said, "Shut up, colour. We're going this way." The generational sort of characteristics that we attach to the 18 to 25-year-olds coming through. They don't want to be part of an organisation, so we were losing people, and they were losing confidence in their leadership. So, it's not their problem; it's a leader's problem. So you've got to keep the leaders contemporary, so to speak.
But that sort of evaluation is sort of that comes back to that idea of being vulnerable and being self-aware and opening yourself up to criticism and that type of thing. So it's sort of it's circled back to where we were discussing earlier. Because if you think you're infallible, then you will be a dictator.
Yep.
And whatever it doesn't matter how many 360 reviews you get, you'll discount them, right? So you've got to be open and receptive to the feedback that you're getting.
Okay.
Totally.
I suppose, Jason, that takes us to the emotions of leadership. The emotional attachment you can have on someone else's perspective of you, or of whatever. How do you manage emotions in teams?
It's a really tough one, and that's one of the hardest questions. But I think I'm just looking in my mind at the moment of how I've dealt with the last 2 years, because the last 2 years has been a very emotional time for the whole world. But within my own team, we've had change many times, and a lot of emotion. And I think just being empathetic for me has been the way that I've dealt with. But each individual is reacting and emoting in a different way to all of the situations around us, whether it be in the corporate environment or what's happening in their home environment or in their home work environment, as it has been. So a time of huge emotions. But I think I just it's interesting, trying to be productive as well when emotions overrun. And that's been the fun part for me is keeping a flow with the group of creatives, and at the same time being productive and hitting the marks, hitting the goal posts you put in your way. But yeah, just I think empathetic has been my personal style with the small team that I have. But still leading and guiding rather than getting bogged down in it. I try not to let my team get bogged down in to try to keep their mental health positive.
Yeah.
Because it works for me being positive in the workplace. looking at the goals and just trying to get in the way.
Yeah. Can I ask you about emotions, in particular some of your passion areas, social justice and the emotion you attach to the cause? When you have to go in to speak for something and stand up for something or advocate for something, how do you manage that space emotionally so that you can have a great outcome?
That's actually very difficult. It's always easier said than done when it's about emotions, because it's not like conflict. It's inevitable. It's everywhere, in every workplace, every situation. It's inseparable from humans generally. What I find that helps me, because of how sensitive social justice and everything around it can be, is emotional awareness. To be so emotionally aware that I can tell, let's say in a conflict situation with a colleague or fellow classmate, that in the heat of the conflict, if they say something that's maybe offensive or not, I should be emotionally aware enough to realize that what they're saying is unexpected. It's sort of character for them, that they would not say it any otherwise.
Yeah.
That's why I should keep telling myself that that was there. I should separate it from the situation and from the person, so that I don't carry it home. I don't carry it tomorrow for next week, or worse, I don't carry the same feelings in another conflict. So emotional awareness there, especially from conflict situations, is very important. I find.
Great. That's great.
And I think there comes a point where you have to consider what people are thinking, but not care what people are thinking to a certain degree. So otherwise, that's how you do carry it from one sort of situation to the next, I think. And what you were saying about being empathetic towards people, which I think is important, but again, you've got to sort of keep that contained.
Yes, totally.
Tying that back to the leader, all the easy problems are typically solved at the lowest level. And so by the time you get to your desk, if you're middle or senior level manager, you get the tough ones. And, it's very difficult to distance yourself from the emotional impacts of those. So having that, the tools available to debrief and to have that capacity to bleed off some of that stress in whatever way ticks the box for you, you've got to actually make sure you find time to do that. I once challenged a group of 16 commanders in a room, what's the most important thing for you in your squadron? And they all went to, being available to my team, great communications, giving my teams the resources, training them. I said, well, you're all wrong. Yeah? It's by and large, it's you. If you're not looking after you, the leader, see my comment earlier about the person sitting in the fetal position in the office. That's a really bad way for an organisation to start when we are very hierarchically focused. So the leader's capacity to endure, is look for help, look for those off-ramps for when they need to just find something that makes them happy. It's a really critical thing, because leadership's a long game. I've been doing this for 35 years, and I've hit walls along that pathway. And if I didn't know how to sort of just get back into my happy zone, there's plenty of people that haven't endured through that.
Rian, you mentioned, we asked earlier about intentionality, and I think you've just raised a really interesting point, and especially for people starting out in their careers, is to seek peers or people, safe people, or whatever it might be that they can talk to and debrief. I find in the business community that it, especially small businesses, a very lonely road for leadership. Very lonely. You don't know who to reach. You've got your accountant and you talk to them about tax, and you've got your lawyer and you talk to them when you're getting sued, and on it goes. And I think it'd be the same if you're at a corporate career, and friends don't understand, because they're not going to bed at night thinking about how they're going to do payroll the next day. There's the unique pressures in whatever leadership you take, and business is just one of course, and whether it's military or academia or whatever it might be, or a corporate career. But I think from at the very beginning of whatever that career looks like or pathway looks like, seeking out people that you can trust, that you building that network, because people often look at, I always find it funny, people want to network, and they're looking for how to go up the ladder, but they're not looking sideways of who can help carry them through and give them counsel and mentor them, if you like. I mean, there's a lot of different words for that, and that can have negative connotations too, but I think we know what we mean. And so I think you raise a really great point there, but being intentional about putting those people in your life, either side of you, as you make the mistakes, go through the very difficult patches, do your first dismissal, all those things. I think it's really important. It's a lonely road, leadership.
Yes, it is.
Last topic. One more. Two more minutes. Talk about a dismissal or a hard conversation that you need to have. What have you learnt about the way that you deliver difficult news? When you're going to make that leadership call, I've heard your point of view, we've gone through things, I'm going to make a hard call. When is an email better than a face-to-face? When do you tweet about sensitive information? Never, hopefully, by the way. How do you communicate some of these things? What lessons have we got to close up with? And then,
I always start with a simple paradigm: praise in public, criticise in private, and do it eyeball to eyeball. And don't. A problem like that isn't like red wine. It doesn't get better with age.
Yeah, very good.
Just rip the band-aid off. Psychologically prepare yourself for a tough conversation, and just get into it. If you let it fester, it's bad for everybody.
Yeah, it's gold.
I didn't want to take up all the 2 minutes.
No.
I think honesty always works.
Yeah.
Totally agree with all of that, but being honest, and it's always more difficult, typically for the person you're speaking to, and so but that's a leadership point where you can lead into a trusting situation, even though they might, you probably will disagree on the outcomes at that point, but I think leaving it, avoiding it, only gets worse, and got to jump in, rip the band-aid off.
Yeah.
I would agree with that, but also making sure, like you were talking about your platform for engagement, shall we say, and making sure that it's appropriate. So in person, obviously, is a more personal experience.
Totally.
So much can get lost over email, for example, and even on the phone. So, having the courage to actually have those conversations, harder conversations face to face, I think is important.
I might just jump.
Please.
Two really quick points that I think are really important. Don't give bad news on a Friday afternoon from an organisation that has gone through a lot of mental health challenges with its people and seen some very dark outcomes. Keeping them in the workplace, unless it's a dismissal, don't do it on a Friday afternoon because they droll over the weekend. Keep them productive. And two, make sure there's always a support person that you can take them, hand them off, and they've got someone ready to just look after them. It's really the over a cliff sort of moment. It's I need to change tack here, but a lot of people take that in a very adverse sense. So make sure you've paired them up with someone who's going to look out for them straight away. It's really important.
Yeah, it's really good. Really good. There's a bit of compassion there. There's a bit of courage there. There's lots of wisdom in the mentorship and in the way that we navigate emotionally, the way that we fight for something that's good and valuable, stand up for something, and have a direction for the difference we want to make. I just think it's been a valuable conversation, and thank you all for joining, and we look forward to the next one. Until then, good night.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rian.